If you have a true scary story that you'd like to submit, go to astheravendreams.com and click the big button to do so. And of course, thank you. I know that this story is going to sound crazy, and there will be a lot of questions of, how did you not know, or whatever, but please, hear me out, because this is a doozy. I've actually read other stories that are similar to this in the past, or heard them on other channels like Let's Read, which was scary in its own way, but to have something like this actually happen is, well, it's another level of horror. This actually happened to me a couple of years ago, in 2020. I live in a small house, rent it, actually, in a fairly quiet neighborhood. I have always felt safe here, but this event definitely challenged that notion. When this happened, I had lived here for about a year and a half or so. Like I said, it was in 2020, and I had moved in 2019. I was sitting in my bedroom, on my bed, just watching YouTube videos on my laptop before going to sleep, when I heard something coming from above me. Now, I do have an attic, and the attic is, well, an attic. It seems sealed off well enough, but in that year of living there, I had already had one issue with squirrels nesting after finding a small hole to get in, or chewing the hole himself, who knows. I was sitting there and I heard what sounded like a similar scratching. At first I wasn't certain that I heard it, but then it happened again, and I was immediately annoyed. I decided that I would ignore it because, well, I was lazy, and I didn't want to call an exterminator in the midst of COVID. And that may sound stupid, but I'm a bit of a shut-in, and I don't like people. I figured that he would nest in the spot that he found, and that would be it. Life would go on. Then, after a couple of days, the noises started to get louder. It wasn't just scratching, but thumps, and then what sounded like footsteps. I decided that I would go ahead and check the attic at the very least to see what I could find. The attic was dusty and cluttered, not just with my old stuff, but there were actually some boxes up there from the previous tenant. I had never taken the time to organize it, and it was basically just storage. I stepped up the ladder and took a quick look around, literally a glance. Nothing looked out of place. The boxes were all where I thought they should be. There weren't any immediately visible holes in the wall, and nothing even really looked disturbed. I thought maybe it was nothing, that the noises were actually outside, or I was just being weirdly paranoid. Then came the next phase for the horror. I had things go missing, or getting moved around in my house. The first thing I noticed missing was underwear, which, looking back, is creepy as hell. They would go missing, or I would find them in weird places, like on the floor in the hallway or in the kitchen. It was weird, and it definitely put me on high alert, but I couldn't really figure out a way to explain it. The doors were all locked. The windows didn't open up, they opened with outward cranks, and it was near impossible to get in them from the outside. Then, one day, when I came home, I found my refrigerator open. As in, wide open. The doors have a dumb lock hinge or something, so if you open it all the way out, you have to pull it to shut it, because it locks in place. It was like someone had opened the door to get something, and left it open. I ended up calling the police and talking with an officer that came out about the whole thing. I explained what I saw, and while he seemed to believe me, there was no evidence of intrusion. So he basically said he would make a report about a potential break-in, but that there wasn't much else to do without evidence. He recommended that I get a Ring doorbell cam to see if someone had a key to my place, or something like that. If nothing else, it would offer a bit of security. I did, and there was literally nothing that it caught. I was feeling confused, a bit paranoid. I was thinking that I had some kind of demon or poltergeist in my place that was making my life hell. Honestly, I was losing my mind, thinking I was just going crazy and that nothing was actually happening. Or I was sleepwalking and didn't realize it. I kept hearing the noises in the attic during the day. I kept noticing things out of place or missing altogether. But there was no evidence of someone breaking into my home, or proof that there was even anyone there. Then, things came to a very abrupt and rather terrifying head. I got home from work as normal, thinking I was going to find my clothes or food in a new random place, but that's not quite what happened. What I did find, though, at the very least, justified all of my craziness and paranoia. I put my purse down, grabbed some water, and walked to my bedroom to get my laptop. When I opened the door, I nearly peed my pants. The room was completely destroyed, with insulation and plaster and ceiling popcorn all over the place. And there, right in the middle of the disaster, was a man, completely unconscious. And, of course, above him was the hole that he had fallen through. I immediately shut the door, grabbed a knife from the kitchen in case this guy woke up, and called the cops. It's impossible to explain the feeling of, I guess, invasion of privacy, destruction of security. Anyways, it's hard to explain what I felt at that moment. The cops showed up and they had to bring in a paramedic as well because the guy was pretty messed up. He'd fallen and smashed his head pretty hard against my dresser, and apparently broken his shoulder as well. They got him out of my apartment, and there were so many questions. Did I know the guy? Had I ever seen him? How did he get in? Thankfully, one of the responding officers was the original one that helped me with the report a few days prior. He and I walked up into the attic to kind of sort things through, and we figured it out. Like I mentioned before, the attic was a bit of a cluttered mess, and things didn't look disturbed because, well, they really weren't. He had slid a couple of boxes over, but not really gone through or messed anything up. This was also the day that I learned that my attic had a small loft, or a little hidden room kind of thing on one side. There was a small wooden door that slid off to the side, and inside were a few blankets and pillows, a backpack, some of my clothing, and a bunch of food wrappers and trash from food that he'd taken from my kitchen. This man had been living there, by the looks of it, for a little while. He would later confess that he'd been living there for around 3 months, and if he hadn't accidentally stepped onto a weak part of the ceiling, I probably wouldn't have known he was there. He eventually did tell the cops everything. He told them that he was homeless, and that he'd been living there without me knowing. Apparently, one day in the winter, it was snowing, and he was just looking for a place to stay warm. I, in my infinite wisdom, just so happened to leave my back door unlocked, and he had made his way in. He went up into the attic to find a place to hide and sleep for, originally, just the night. But he liked it, and he decided to stay for a while. He claimed that he would never have hurt me and that he didn't mean to scare me, which honestly wasn't much comfort, and that he was just going to stay for a little while longer and then leave. It was also fun to explain to the owner of the house that I now had a large hole in my bedroom ceiling. But thankfully there was a police report to explain that and say that it wasn't caused by me, and their insurance covered the cost. I can tell you that I also organized the attic after this as well, tossing everything I didn't need or wasn't mine, and I've kept that little door on the loft open at all times. I also installed a few lights up there that I can turn on from the hallway, so it's brightly lit, and I can see everything from the ladder. Obviously, nothing like this has happened again, and hopefully nothing ever will, but the fact that it happened at all was nothing shy of a nightmare. My girlfriend and I went to pick up a pair of chairs yesterday from someone on Facebook Marketplace. We live in the Northeast, and it was about an hour away, but a good deal, and we'd enjoy a nice autumn drive. I know that Facebook Marketplace can be sketchy, but I didn't get any huge red flags from the seller. Their profile picture was a flower or something, but I know it's common for older people not to use a picture of themselves for that. I clicked into their profile and saw some photos of what seemed to be her, a middle-aged Asian lady, with her family. She was also being extremely cordial and nice. Last Wednesday, we agreed to meet Monday at 9 a.m., but on Thursday night, they texted me reminding me about our meetup tomorrow, so Friday. I reminded them that we were meeting on Monday, and they apologized. Again, I didn't think this was that weird. The listing was for 8 chairs, and we were only taking 2, so I figured that she was coordinating with more than one person. Anyway, we get out there, and I notice once we're close that the listing has been taken down on Facebook. This wouldn't be weird if we were buying all the chairs, but we were not. We pull up, and it's this unmarked warehouse on a quiet street. I see one car in the way back of the warehouse, near an open garage entrance. I immediately ask my girlfriend if this seems kind of weird, but she says no. The person gave us a number to call, so she calls it. The person picks up, and we see a young, thin Chinese woman, who clearly did not look like the person from the Facebook profile, come out and wave to us from afar. On the phone, she really quickly says to back up towards the open garage doors and gestures toward us. And then she really quickly disappears back into the garage. I drive over and start backing in toward the garage doors in this little area that is fenced in from the right side. Very tight space. I stop for a second and look into my rearview mirror. The garage is pitch dark and empty. No signs of anyone. Having not given us instructions other than to back in, I thought the seller must have wanted us to get out and walk back toward the garage with her, which I immediately knew I was not going to do. At this point, my girlfriend independently thought that something was off. Why did she just disappear? What was this weird, creepy warehouse? Having waited long enough, we pulled out and got out of there. Maybe it was nothing, but it gave us both a bad feeling. What do you think? Did we overreact? Or was this possibly something nefarious? Consider subscribing, or the next time you go outside, a squirrel will judge you mercilessly. I'm usually a pretty laid-back person who really tries not to automatically assume the worst about strangers. I like to believe that everyone means well in how they do things, and most people don't have malicious intent. Most people. I know there are people out there that are messed up and really mean to do harm, but they're the outliers. I have one experience that I want to share that definitely involved one of those outliers, and it's one that taught me to trust my instincts more than anything. It was a Friday night, late last July. I was getting ready to grab dinner after a disgustingly intense week of 12-hour workdays. My team at work had lost a few people and hadn't had the budget or time to replace them, so our workloads were doubled. Of course, the pay wasn't. It's the joys of being a salaried exempt employee, I guess. After the week I'd had, cooking was the last thing I wanted to do, so I put in an order to a hole-in-the-wall Thai place a couple blocks from my apartment. I figured I could use the exercise after being cooped up in the office all week. The food was ready lightning fast when I arrived, so I ended up leaving the restaurant and starting my short walk home at around 7:15 p.m. It was still pretty light out, but that sweltering July heat was finally letting go of the day, and I was thinking that it was going to be a really nice evening walk. There was even a slight breeze picking up, so I was getting pretty psyched about this short little trek. I was maybe about 2 blocks from my place when some movement in an overgrown hedge caught my peripheral vision. At first I thought it was just a cat or something, maybe a raccoon. But then I heard a hoarse whisper rasp out of the shrubbery. "Hey, buddy. Sorry to bother you, but can you help me for a second?" I froze for a moment, thinking there was no way I had just encountered the talking shrubbery from biblical times. But after a couple of seconds, the man that was talking to me stepped out from the hedges onto the path. I sort of just paused and stared at him. He looked slightly unkempt, but didn't look like he was too far removed from society. He had a thick beard, but his hair looked decently clean, and his clothes looked like they were in good condition. It was a bit weird that he was hiding in the bushes, but again, I don't like to judge too much on first impressions. Sure, part of me wanted to turn and walk away, but then the other part of me thought, what if he really needs help, and you just leave him there with no one? I nodded slightly at him and just kind of asked, "Hey, yeah, sure, what's going on? How can I help you? Are you okay?" I didn't see any blood or anything, but who knew if this guy had an internal injury or was going through something? My question was pretty straightforward. I didn't ask it with any room for further elaboration, simply asking, "Are you okay? How can I help?" But this guy's body language shifted hard, like I had asked something incredibly offensive. His neutral face fell into a scowl as he tensed up. "Okay? No, man, I am not okay. Nothing is okay." I watched him as he balled up his fist and started to approach me. "You were going to walk by without even asking if I needed help. I'm hungry. I haven't eaten anything in 2 damn days, and I haven't slept in a week. And you think that I'm okay?" I had no idea why he was going off on me like this, other than he wasn't all there. I really didn't see the offense in what I had said to him, but he clearly was not happy with me. By this point, he was stepping toward me and starting to close the gap. I had taken a couple of steps backwards, but my anxiety was causing me to not move very quickly. My heart was pounding and I wanted to run away, but the lizard brain part of me was saying, "Hey, if you keep cool and talk to him calmly, surely he'll settle down." I started with, "Hey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything by it. I think I have $10. I can spare it if you need it. I really don't mind." I put my hands up and motioned toward my hip. "I just got this food from the Thai place down the way. They're really good and they're reasonably priced." I said this as if he and I were going to discuss the finer points of cow soy or something. This just made him even more angry and he yelled out, "I don't want your charity, you a-hole." Now, at this point, I was super confused. He was mad that I wasn't being charitable but didn't want my charity? Before I could say anything, though, he charged at me at full speed. I turned to run, dropping my beautiful pad thai as I did so, but he was way too close, and he managed to tackle me to the ground. I felt my face hit the concrete, and then I started feeling this man's fists pummel me everywhere he could. All I could do was crumple up into the fetal position and hope that he would just take my wallet without killing me. But each punch and kick felt like he was leaning closer and closer to the ladder. Out of nowhere, I hear this thunderous roar of, "Hey, get the F off of him!" which caused the fury of hits to pause. I opened my eyes slightly to see a huge bodybuilding type dude sprinting from across the street from the Planet Fitness straight into our direction. The crazy dude barely had time to look up before getting absolutely leveled by this guy. He knocked him out cold with a single right hook. This massive guy then helped me to my feet, asking me repeatedly if I was okay, if I needed an ambulance, if I was bleeding, and so forth. I told him that I was pretty sure I was fine, and I thanked him for helping me. He said that he had seen the whole thing play out from the window at the gym. He had just finished his last set, and was taking a few moments to walk around, kind of cool off, when he noticed this guy starting to attack me. He apologized that he didn't jump in sooner to stop it, but he didn't know the guy was going to lose it on me, and then he mentioned that he should probably check on the crazy effort to make sure he didn't do too much damage. To be completely honest, I was just shell-shocked by the whole situation, and I could barely get any coherent words out. I just stood there for a few minutes, covered in scrapes and a few cuts, absolutely reeling at how sideways that encounter had gone in what was probably 2 minutes. How easy it was for me to drop my guard. Naivety at its peak, really. The bodybuilder guy told me to go have a seat in the gym, that they were going to let me in since they knew what was happening, and that he would stay there until the cops showed up, just in case this guy woke up before then. This whole thing was just a crazy event that really has made me rethink things. This guy was too far gone for friendly conversation, and while I wouldn't wish that dude's haymaker on anyone, he kind of deserved it. There's really not much else that happened. It was the normal, cops came, talked to people, got the unconscious guy into an ambulance, and that's about it. When I was in middle school, my mom and I went shopping for back-to-school clothes at a popular discount department store. It may be important to note that this was a new location for us, as it was in a nearby town that we never really went to. However, this town had somewhat of a reputation for trafficking and the kidnappings of young girls, especially compared to the rest of the region. My mom was looking at stuff in a section that I found boring, so I wandered off to explore what else the store had. I ended up in the baseball hat section. This happened around 2012 and 2013, so snapbacks were hugely in style, and all of the cool kids had one. I picked up a black snapback, crouching down to look at the rest of the hats on the bottom of the display. For some reason, I had this very weird sense of imminent danger that I've never felt before, and haven't really experienced since. Call them spider senses or what have you, but I could sense something nearby that posed a threat to me. I genuinely can't explain it, and I didn't really understand why at the time, but something compelled me to stand up and turn and walk away immediately. I swear a voice in my head said, "Stand up." In the process of doing so, I registered that 2 men were standing very close to me, about 3 to 4 feet away. As I stood up, one of them was already in the process of stepping towards me, and both of them had this very creepy smirk on their faces. I guess that I had surprised them with my sudden movement, as they both kind of jumped back as I turned away. Maybe it's just my general distrust of the world, but I genuinely believed that if I hadn't stood up when I did, I could have easily been grabbed from this store, especially because I was nowhere near my mom. My grandmother always told me stories of her guardian angel, and though I'm not really religious at all, I swear the voice in my head that told me I needed to leave, it was some higher force watching over me. If nothing else, I hope this teaches young people to be on high alert at all times, especially in new places. You can never be too safe. My insurance had changed, and the local pharmacy I was to use was notorious for horrible service. I had heard about a nearby privately owned pharmacy and found they had outstanding service and even free delivery, which was great. I got used to my doorbell camera recording this gentleman who was older, looking at the prescription, and on this day he called out my full name, which was odd. Then he let out a little whistling tune, but it was not any known song, just made up. I save oddities on my doorbell video camera, so I saved this. I replayed it several times. Weird, I thought. So later that night, I was in the living room watching a series that was old, I've never seen it. Each night I watched 2 episodes. The whole house was dark, quiet, and secure. The show was possibly audible outside, but not noisy. Suddenly, I heard something by the corner living room window. It seemed with the light of the TV and the street light that I could see the figure of a man, and I muted the TV. Suddenly, I heard that same funny tune of that earlier delivery man and froze. You know how a little boy up to something sometimes whistles? It was just like that. I am a night owl, and it was 2:30 a.m. Was he going to try to peek in? I knew that he couldn't see into those curtains. Was he going to attempt to break in? I wanted to see if I heard any further sound and just heard the whistling. So I turned up the TV to maximum volume and then removed the mute setting, and the main character in the show was talking very loudly. Then I muted it again and heard nothing. But I saw the shadow pass the windows, leaving. He didn't seem to return, but it really gave me the creeps. Was he about to break into that window? Scary. Maybe a peeping creepy Tom or what? It seemed that he was, for some reason, fixated on looking at my name or reading my prescription info in an overly curious manner each time he'd come upon review. Yet, I only took simple medications, of no real interest to anyone. So, Mr. Whistler, curiosity killed the cat. So walk on, and be gone. This happened a few years ago, so forgive me if some of the details are fuzzy. It was a nice summer evening and I was walking downtown to meet a friend for a drink on a patio. A couple blocks from the bar, a man approached me asking for a cigarette. I don't smoke and said sorry for not having one, and then he commented on my tattoos. I have 2 sleeves, both horror-themed, so I'm pretty well covered in skulls and creepy stuff. I mentioned that I was a horror fan and he warned me that markings like that could be a gateway to evil. Okay, noted. Then he asked me if I was familiar with the movie The Omen. I said yes, and he said that he was involved with the movie. Now, I'm assuming he's going to tell me that he was an extra or worked on the set. No, he tells me that he is the man who inspired Damien, that he was the son of Satan. He then told me a fascinatingly spun story about how the crossroads of the street he was born on, his house number and home city, were all symbols and signs that foretold a prophecy of his origin. Now, of course, he was just waiting to be called upon. The patio I was going to was nicknamed the Dragon's Den, so this was a further sign for him. I ran into him one other time while walking home. Clearly he had a mental illness, and this had never made me uncomfortable, so I spoke with him again. On this day, he was explaining how certain letters on street signs were markers of whether or not they were evil. E was bad, Mark or Mac was demonic, etc. He also told me that the soul of aborted children were trapped in the earth and haunted it. This isn't scary per se, but I do still think about him from time to time. What a fascinating, freaky world to live in. So That, my friends, was a collection of stalker and stranger encounter stories, or creepy encounters. The let's not meet style stories, the stories where even some situations where nothing necessarily happened, they were still creepy. Because people be creepin', as always. Hopefully you all enjoyed these stories, and as I always say, you can pull some level of education from them. If you ever find yourself in an odd situation, trust your gut. Always. If you feel something is off and can escape the situation, do what you can to get out of it. Just in case. It may be an overreaction, sometimes, but preemptively overreacting is definitely better than having to react to a threat at the time of the threat occurring. Did that make sense? It made sense in my head. Oh, I'm going to pretend it made sense. So, again, thank you to everyone who submitted their stories to me or allowed me to use their stories from Reddit. It's always appreciated. You all are amazing people who let me do these stories. Especially whenever these situations can be, traumatizing, obviously. The attic one, the homeless guy, the near kidnapping thing could definitely freak you out. The whistling driver one, all of them have that sense of, I mean, obviously horror, right? That real world terror that exists. But there's definitely a sense of trauma, and sharing them, I guess, is therapeutic to some. So, same with hearing them, I think. Anyways, thank you to each and every single one of you who submitted your stories or let me use their stories. And thank you, people, for listening. You all are amazing as well. And if you listened to this point and got to the part where I said that, consider hitting the thumbs up button, as it does help the channel tremendously. And subscribe if you're new. Submit your stories at astheravendreams.com. Leave a comment if you're feeling bold and would like to just have a small discussion with me. I try to respond to as many people as possible. That's what I was trying to say. And you can join Patreon and membership to get early access to content like this, if you choose to do so, and other things depending on what you choose to do, or a super thanks, which is just a tip to the channel, which just supports me further and is always appreciated, but never expected. All that said, friends, I hope you have a gorgeous rest of your week. Hope to see you again here very soon. I will see you again very soon. But until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, much love, and sleep well.